To be honest, I never felt really comfortable in a locker room. I always felt like I had to be kind of machismo, I'm going to dominate that guy, I'm going to kill him, because you're these gladiators, you're going out on these fields in front of these people and you're essentially slaying each other, and so that was something I never became comfortable with. And in fact, I even tried to kind of hide that part of me, that sensitive part of me. So baseball was very turbulent for me.
Hi, I'm Donna Cruz. Welcome to CIA, Contagious Influencers of America, hosted by Victoria Robinson, co-host of the HGTV series My House is Your House, and Keep the Faith Radio's executive producer, 9-time Emmy winner David Sams.
Thank you, Donna.
Hey, what's with that voice, Victoria?
I've been practicing for my 1-800 my new job.
I thought it was one of those 900 numbers.
Oh, 900. I've been talking so much. I've been speaking so much. I've lost my voice, but it's been like this for going on 3 weeks now.
Well, I just think it's mesmerizing. It does something for me.
Shut up.
I'll be thinking
I have
of
a raspy voice anyway. I can't fake my voice, but now it's a little bit more masculine than normal. You call it hot. I call it masculine.
Today we have with us somebody that you know.
Very well. Mm-hmm. They're very close friends of mine, and I've known them for years, and I adore these people.
We're talking about Barry Zito, one of the greatest major league pitchers of all time, a Cy Young Award winner, a 3 times All-Star, a World Series champion. The list of accolades goes on and on and on. Well, but he's also an overcomer.
He is. He is an overcomer. And the thing about Barry is, when I met Barry several years ago, he was already retired. When I met he and Amber, they're friends with my daughter, Taryn and Chad, her husband.
What did he retire at 30 or something?
Yeah, I guess. He really did. I didn't even know who he was because I don't watch baseball. Mm-hmm. So I had no idea. And I was talking to a friend and saying, yeah, our friends, Barry, we were having a cookout, and I was telling him everybody was coming. And my friend said, wait, did you say Barry Zito? I'm like, do you know Barry and Amber? And my friend goes, do you even know who that is? I said, no, it's Barry and Amber. I had no idea how massive of a baseball star Barry is. But so that aside, all those accolades that he is great at and well known for, et cetera, and that's all great. He's an incredible man. Mm-hmm. He's a guy of integrity. He's just a straight up, awesome Christian man, loves his family, good friend to people. I fell in love with the real Barry Zito, not the baseball star Barry Zito.
And his book is coming out.
It is in September, I think, right?
Yes.
And I was so bummed because I was out of town. I was speaking at an event and I had to miss the interview with Barry. I would have loved to have been here.
So for those of you who are sitting here going, why? I have no interest in baseball. I'm not a sports person. I don't think I'm going to listen to the next umpteen minutes of this interview. I assure you it's not what you expect.
It is not, and you don't want to miss this interview with David Sams and Barry Zito.
Hey, Barry.
How's it going?
Good, man. How long have you been in Nashville?
I've been here almost 4 years now.
Wow. So you've seen the growth. You've seen the craziness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I came out from California in 2015, so I figure if I get 5 years out here, then I can start complaining about people coming out here.
Right. We're going to talk about your past life in just a minute, but right now I want to know about your current life, your relationship and your family, and why you decided to come to Nashville, and about your music.
Yeah. It's interesting how God kind of brings you on this, as Mark Batterson puts it, this wild goose chase, right? It's like we don't know where we're going, but we just keep trying to follow. So yeah, my wife and I actually were remodeling a home in San Diego, and I lived in LA for 15 years, just in the heart of it out there. And I came out here to retire, to essentially play 1 year of baseball and then retire. And I was fine with being in AAA. I had played in the major leagues for 14 years, took a year off in San Diego where I was just kind of working on my stuff and wanted to come back and enjoy the game before I walked away, because I was very bitter and disenchanted, and it became all about expectations and pressure and, money and all the things, right? So I came out here and played, had the best time ever playing AAA. I never thought it would be so fun. And then the construction was getting delayed in San Diego. So my wife and I, who were renting a home in Belmead, we just, re-upped our lease month to month. We were waiting for the builders to tell us. And pretty soon we just went, what are we doing? We're not, I know the house is amazing and we thought it was going to be our forever home, but we ended up selling that place, never moved back there, never lived in it a day. And we stayed out in Nashville, and it's just been such an incredible decision on many fronts. But as you know, it's very warm, kind of a warm heart out here, as well as a lot of fun stuff and creative hustle. But there's this backbone of just something I can't put my finger on. I don't know why.
Not to mention the fact that there's no state income tax.
Yes, there's no income tax. Yeah, my earning years are behind me, but that's a big draw for people. I know that.
You've been married to Amber for how many years?
Yeah, been married for almost 8 years, and my wife's actually from Southeast Missouri, and so it's really nice to be back. 4 hours driving from there.
Yeah.
My parents are both passed, and I have some scattered family, but it's really nice. I have 2 sons, 2 and almost 5. So it's really nice that they'll be able to have cousins and grandparents and aunts and uncles that are in their life consistently. And, that's what we get out here too.
What does family mean to you? I mean, you were quite the quintessential Hollywood playboy for a while, right?
Yeah.
And really into the whole nightlife thing. How has life changed going from that to where you are now?
It feels like a past life. I mean, it feels like a different world, really, where I'm at. I mean, it's mind-boggling to think that was just, 9-10 years ago, that I was searching for my identity on the streets of Hollywood, trying to figure out who I was. And, I thought the answer was in, all these different places. And of course it wasn't. But what I realized is, I'm really a family guy. I didn't think that. I never aspired to be like, have a family and have children. I knew one day I'd get married, but again, because of these identity issues, I always was married to my baseball career. And that was something my father always drove into me. So I had broken up with girlfriends for many years, every time the season started. And they never understood why. They're like, but we get along great. And, I have to focus, and kind of writing this book that I just finished. It's interesting to look back and really have a little more perspective, like, whoa, my father really conditioned me to see women as a distraction and long-term relationships as a distraction to my work. And obviously no balance in that. So I have a lot of balance now. I work at the studio during the day and I write songs and do production stuff. And I come home to my kids at night and my wife, and it's incredible. My life is so rich right now.
The music is in your soul. Your mom, I think, was a singer, right?
Yeah. She sang for Nat Cole. She was in a backup group for Nat Cole.
Wow.
Called the Merry Young Souls. And she had gone to UCLA as a freshman and then went and tried out in California, sang that old classic Summertime, and got the part, flew to New York, and then became part of Nat's backup group. And my father at the time was Nat's conductor and arranger, his road conductor. So they met there, and my father was married at the time with 3 kids, fell in love with my mother, and got divorced and asked her dad for her hand in marriage. And of course, this guy's 15 years older than I just imagine this. My mom's father, this Italian guy from the Bronx comes out. He's 15 years older, and he has just gotten divorced and has 3 children. And he's asking for her hand in marriage. So I got to hand it to that guy for saying yes,
And he lived to tell about it.
He lived to tell, yeah. Yeah, incredible.
So what was that like growing up in a musical household?
It was amazing. I mean, I wasn't around when my father was full blown in music hardcore. I mean, Nat died in, I think, 1964. And so when that happened, my father tried to make things happen in New York for a few years. And then eventually started educating himself on entertainment law, knew he needed a new career. So they then moved to Vegas. He became a talent manager and started managing all these lounge acts and all these things. So I was born in 1978 when he was in the heart of that. And then we moved to San Diego when I was 6. So I just kind of remember Dad always working in his little kind of home studio, which back then they didn't really have those. But he was always working. He had a mixing board and the old, Mac computers with the old floppy disks. And there was always just great music on in the house, though. It was Gino Vanelli was one of the staples in the house, and incredible artist named Basha. And then, of course, all the old jazz standards and the Frank Sinatras and the Nat Coles. And so that stuff, all that stuff was just in my blood. I mean, I just, I didn't even think about it. It was there.
Did you play instruments as a kid?
Ironically, my father dissuaded me in a big way from music. He told me, and it's funny, I am in the heart of Nashville, but he said, music, you can't make a living in music. He said, you can be the greatest, artist, singer, guitar player, whatever, unless you have the machinery behind you pushing you, you're not going to make a living. Whereas baseball, fastball, curveball, changeup, you master those three, they'll send their scouts to the end of the earth to find you. And that's the thing is, baseball organizations do send these scouts out to, these foreign countries, the Dominican, Venezuela, Japan, Taiwan now, just an old barn in the who knows where in Iowa. They hear a kid's throwing 95 somewhere, they're going to go figure it out. And so he was right about that. And that was the focus, growing up. We were in the backyard almost every day for 12 years. And I did have an affinity for baseball. It's not like he forced it on me. I ran out to that little chalked out, circle in the middle of the t-ball field. And for whatever reason, I just wanted to be in the middle of the field. Maybe because the entertainer in me from my family, but, and he just ran with that. Yeah. He just kind of developed that as a career manager.
So your dad was an inspiration to you, and at the same time, he seemed to have had this thing in him, this thing he was fighting himself, and he had to reinvent himself. You've, to some extent, you mirrored that. You've reinvented yourself. You've gone through that, right?
That's interesting.
I mean,
didn't think of it like that.
I mean, now you're a musician, an artist. What's it like waking up in the morning, writing a song versus going out on the field and playing baseball?
The writing the song part or the being creative is interesting because obviously in this town you have co-writes and collaborations, so you do have to show up. And then there's the days when you're working by yourself. And it seems to be, I don't know, for me, it's a lot more of a peaceful journey doing creativity and working with musicians. I feel a lot more at home just being around musical, more sensitive, kind of introverted type of people. To be honest, I never felt really comfortable in a locker room. I always felt like I had to be kind of machismo, I'm going to dominate that guy, I'm going to kill him, and that's not how every athlete is, but that's generally kind of the mindset because you're these gladiators, you're going out on these fields in front of these people and you're essentially slaying each other, and so that was something I never became comfortable with. And in fact, I even tried to kind of hide that part of me, that sensitive part of me, that part that's maybe a little more aware of my own stuff. And that became probably my biggest pitfall in the game. So baseball was very turbulent for me, mentally, emotionally for many years. I mean, there were good years too, but I think generally I'm a lot more streamlined internally doing the music now.
So it sounds to me like baseball is a lot more of survival of the fittest, whereas music for you is much more collaborative and much more of a team sort of work, that feeling of camaraderie, much more in music than you had in baseball.
It is, yeah, because creatively collaborating, you're just kind of throwing stuff out there and you don't know if the other person's going to like it or hate it. So you constantly have to humble yourself and get rid of that ego. And the second you think something's great, it's probably not in music, right? And so you really have to keep your head down and just keep going. Whereas in baseball, I always felt like the ego, the cockiness was going to help me win the game. And whenever I had that approach, I was wrong, of course. But oddly, people don't kind of understand that professional sports is kind of similar to being an independent contractor, where you have this team, but really, at the end of the day, everyone's fighting for limited spots. And even best friends, are fighting to put food on the table for their family. And one of the guys is going to get the job. So it can be very much an individual sport, even though everyone's together.
Speaking of throwing things out there, when did you learn that you had the curveball? When did it really kick in?
I have memories of being 7 years old, and this book called The Art of Pitching had just, my dad just brought it home. And he was always great about taking me through all the books and helping me because he was a career manager. I mean, he didn't know anything about sports, but he knew about success. He always told me, I know the ingredients of success and the signs of failure. I may not know baseball. So he had me read this book, and there was these pictures of curveball grips in it. And I just grabbed it like the picture. And oddly, the picture was a right-handed hand, and I was left-handed. So I grabbed it, and I think I must have grabbed it the wrong way or something because my curveball, the way I held it was actually different than anyone I ever came across my career. But even at 7 years old, right, when I started throwing, it just had this big loop to it, and it dropped. And of course, there wasn't a lot of 7-year-olds throwing curveballs either. So that was a huge advantage for many years.
And how long did it take you to really perfect that?
Probably by the time I was 10, 11, 12. I mean, I could throw it for a strike more than half the time, which is kind of a lot for a curveball. Yeah, and then that just became my signature pitch. I mean, really for the rest of my career.
And when did your dad truly recognize that there was something special with that pitch and with you as it relates to baseball?
I think really right away. I mean, I have videotapes of pitching, at 7 years old and throwing this curveball and, this huge looper. And I can't even fathom a 7-year-old throwing it because I've worked with kids and, of course they tell people now, don't even start throwing a curveball till you start shaving. So everyone thought the curveball was the reason for the injury that all these pitchers were getting, but then they've just come out now and realized that it's probably fastballs that are causing all these Tommy John injuries, these ligaments in people's elbows to keep popping. But back then, it was fair game. So it was really a very quick ascent, I think, to the success part of the curveball.
So is there just something in the DNA of certain individuals? I mean, I've seen, I'm an Ohio State guy, so I've seen that footage of Dwayne Haskins when he's a kid in an Ohio State jersey with the number that he's going to play when he's on Ohio State, right? Years later.
Wow.
I've seen a little video of Tiger Woods when he was a kid golfing, right? Now you're telling me about you as a kid and the videos that you have, right? Is there just something that God puts in certain kids that has that talent from the get-go?
It's an interesting question. I would tell you that my answer now is 180 degrees from what it would have been, what it was 10 years ago. I have a specific memory of a woman coming up to me in a hotel in Philadelphia when I was playing baseball. We were in the Ritz-Carlton there downtown, and it was after a game. This woman comes up to me, and this is before I became a Christian. I was raised in a very spiritual kind of New Age church and taught that it was essentially up to me entirely, my salvation, whether I could get to God, whether I could become what I needed to become in my life. It was purely up to me. So this woman goes, Barry, gosh, you just must be so grateful for how blessed you've been with that curveball. And I literally got upset with her and I said, are you kidding me? You don't even know how long I've been working. I've been in my backyard since I was 6 years old. I've been working so hard for it. And I literally took it as a slight on me. And the whole idea of being grateful for this gift, this blessing, that was something that infuriated me. And so it just shows kind of where my heart was at the time. Now I will tell you, hands down, I have no idea how any of the success happened. I have no idea where the curveball came from. I worked in my backyard probably like every other kid growing up. I mean, my dad was especially committed to me and had extra time, but I would say 100% that was just how it was supposed to be for me. I was just supposed to throw this curveball.
Let's just go through some bullet points. Cy Young winner. You've been to the World Series, twice?
Yep.
How many overall games did you win in your career?
Somewhere around 160.
You don't have that number down?
I don't. It's actually a sore spot for me because, again, my father always told me 300 wins.
Right. Oh, okay.
That was our goal, right? So the career, the first handful of years went really kind of the way we expected. And then, after that, it got kind of really bad. So
tell me about those first few years.
The first few years have you ever heard that saying, the kind of the arc of the master is the unconscious competence. That's the first step, right? You're just really good. You don't know why. And then there's the conscious incompetence. Oh crap, this is really hard. What's going on? I'm in the big leagues. Oh my, these guys are really good. I don't know what to do. And then there's the conscious competence, which is the third step. So those first few years in Oakland for me, where, there was a Cy Young and just incredible win-loss record and all kinds of consistency, was I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just having a great time. And it's that beautiful kind of beginner's mind thing that people talk about, that's what that was. And then after the Cy Young, I just was like, oh, wow, what just happened? Now I have to do this every year. And my father at the time was saying, Barry, you can win 10 of these, And so I wasn't grateful that I'd won a Cy Young. I was like, perfect, 1 down, 9 to go. Here we go. And everything was just about the end result. It was about how successful I'm going to be versus, do I love this? Am I having fun? Everything was totally backwards. And so after that, it was kind of a slow process all the way down to just terrible.
What was that feeling like when you realized that you were on this you were a hamster on the wheel, and you couldn't get off, and you had that pressure from your dad to win again, win again, win again. I mean, at some point, you got to know it's like the stock market. It's gonna crash at some point, right? You must have known that in the back of your head, or maybe you didn't. I mean, I spent many years in Hollywood, and I had a good run, and I know what it's like when you're in the middle of that run. The last thing you're really thinking about is crashing.
Sure.
And I know even when I worked with Michael Jackson back in the day, he did Thriller, and then he did Bad. How do you top something like Thriller? Right?
Yeah, man.
I mean, we can go through these stories over and over and over again, right?
That's right.
The pressure that mounts on you is just off the charts. But at that time, when you were on top of your game, when you won the Cy Young Award, and when you got the biggest contract in the history of the game for a pitcher, right?
Yep.
How do you balance all of that out in your mind with some kind of sanity and some kind of reasoning that, you know what, I better put some money in the bank. I better prepare for the worst. What if I blow my arm out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Or was that just not part of your mindset?
I mean, that's a very valid question you're asking. And that's essentially, in my eyes now, that's reality, right? I could die on the way home in my car today, and that's a fact. So, but I grew up with the idea of, if we talk about that, it's not the idea of let's prepare for this in case. That was, no, I'm putting this bad energy out into the world now, and now it's probably going to come back to me, and I'm going to create this bad situation that I don't want. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not even going to mention the fact that it might happen. So when everything was happening like that, there was no gratitude. There was no, wow, this is amazing. This was like, yeah, exactly. This is who I am. This is what I created through my mindset, through my hard work, through my mental work. These were the things. I mean, this is the downside, in my opinion, of this kind of spiritual movement that's happening, where, it's all about me manifesting my own reality. This is the downside. That stuff is awesome when your reality is going good. Heck yeah, pat yourself on the back. It's all you. When things start going the way that you don't want them to, and you can't change them, now what? And that's what happened to me. And so I couldn't point the finger at anyone but myself, because if I created all the success, then surely it was all my fault that the bad stuff was going bad. So I just sank into this pool of shame and self-disgust, self-hate. And a few years later, that's where Christ came in. I only relied on my own strength for how many ever years before I either took my own life or, it got really bad.
Did you think about that? Suicide?
Yeah, I never had a plan, and I know that that's kind of the line of demarcation, but I wanted out so bad. of all the self-hate, really, is what it was. And that was just exacerbated by the fans and the media and all these people in the Bay Area, and, you know, walking into bars and restaurants and people yelling, you know, expletive Zito, like yelling from the other side, screw it, you terrible, you know, and I don't know where it's coming from. But so the shame and the, you know, that was all super heavy. So yeah, I mean, I definitely thought about that, but again, I never took it as far as, thank God, that I could have.
What year was it that you played and you got all the way to the end of the season and your team went to the World Series and you didn't get to go? You were benched.
Yeah, so that was 2010. So I signed my Giants contract in 2007, and Barry Bonds was playing his last year at that point. So we played together for a year. And, you know, Barry was the face of the franchise, obviously, being the greatest home run hitter ever. And so they brought me in to be the new face of the franchise after Barry left. So, you know, 4 bad years, and then 2010, another subpar year. And, you know, last game of the season, we clinched the NL West. And I realized, you know, they can only take 4 starters to the playoffs. I was always the main guy, you know, through all those years in Oakland. So now I got brought over to San Francisco to lead my team to a World Series, getting paid 3, 4, 5 times as much as anybody else on the team. And the manager calls me in the office while everyone's going crazy with champagne in the locker room and tells me that, you know, this is really hard, Barry. You know, I love you, but we're taking our best 4. Why don't you just go back to LA, pack it up? We'll see you next spring. Just regroup, get your mind right. And, you know, my reaction is, are you kidding me? These are my boys. I'm not going anywhere. This is what I literally grew up trying to win a World Series. So I was completely shell-shocked and opted to stay with the team and work out in case somebody got injured. So I ended up having to watch my team go all the way to the World Series and win it and kind of fake be happy in each celebration with the champagne as if I wanted everyone to win. I actually, in all honesty, I didn't want anybody to win. I wanted to go home. I wanted them to lose, and I wanted to go home. And I wanted to just get out of that situation. And I mean, to be totally honest, I was actually rooting against them in my head.
So what turned it around?
Complete misery. I mean, simple enough. I went back to LA just completely numb. And even my best friend at the time was a closer for the team, a guy named Brian Wilson, who had this really long beard, and he was probably the most famous guy in sports at that time. And I had invited him back to live with me a couple years before. And so we stayed together in Hollywood and went and had crazy nights and all that. Well, now Brian was the most famous guy in sports. He got his own place in LA. And so all my friends, I went back home to LA, and all my friends were hanging out at his house. So now baseball was gone. All my friends were at his house. My mother had been passed for a number of years, but my father actually had a stroke and was in ICU, and that happened during the playoffs. And so basically anything that I could ever lean on in my life was ripped from me, which, looking back, was incredible. What a blessing. I mean, God, you know, he redeems all things, but I had nothing left. And so I went to this codependency 12-step meeting because I realized how much I needed other people's opinions to validate my self-worth. And that second step, you know, willing to acknowledge that there's a power greater than me that can restore my sanity. That was something I never believed. It was always me who could restore me my sanity. That was the first thing. And I came to Christ about 8 months later.
And what role did your girlfriend at the time have to play with that, Amber?
I had met Amber a couple years earlier in LA. She moved out from Missouri to, you know, be a model and an actress. And I had met her kind of when I was with Brian Wilson and we were going crazy in Hollywood. And she had a boyfriend at the time. So we just we didn't really ever see each other. But a couple years later, I invited her up to a baseball game and we started dating in 2010. The interesting thing about Amber is when she would pray, she was like talking to a friend of hers. That was so different. I used to pray to a force, you know, to the universal force. So it was just me alone and this force that kind of didn't have this loving personality. She would pray like she was praying to her dad, to this loving father. And that was so interesting to me. And she would just have these conversations with her eyes closed. So different. And she would also pray for me and for other people. I never did that. It was always about, what do I need? How am I going to get it? How can I manipulate this force to give me what I need, right? And so that was also planting a seed in my head. And Amber, in a lot of ways, kind of showed me the gospel, showed me Christ. And so in 2011, when I'd been injured for the first time, and I feel like things were still just going worse and worse, couldn't pitch, was missing my first games ever by injury after 11 seasons. And I'm reading every self-help book ever, from Barnes & Noble. I literally was surrounded on the bed with 5 or 6 books. And she walks up to me and she goes, "Babe, I think you need to lock your books up." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, I think you just need to read one book." And she hands me a Bible. And going back and talking to her about it, she was terrified to say that, right? Because she doesn't want to put me off. So we put all my books away and I start reading this, start going to team Bible studies and talking to our chaplain, Jeff Org, and super incredible experience. I mean, really just the love, the comfort, the peace of oh, wait, so it's okay to say I'm broken? It's okay to say I'm actually not worthy? Those were that was blasphemy in my home. If I ever said I'm not worthy or not good enough, no, don't do that. You're going to create bad things in your life. I mean, it's funny now looking back. But now I got all this peace from saying I'm kind of just terrible at everything, and I can't do what I want to do. I want to do this, but I can't ever do it the way I want to do it because there's just something in me that's just terrible. Well, I learned later that's sin. Whoa. And that was another bad word in my house. We never said sin.
When you went to these Bible studies, because we see these things portrayed in movies, and they're kind of trite, they're kind of preachy,
sure,
etc.
Yeah.
Here you are, a one-of-a-kind star athlete with all the accolades, and you show up at a Bible study. And I've always wondered, how does a guy on the top of the charts show up to a Bible study and people aren't staring at you and going, what's his problem? I thought he had it all together. So you have that added pressure on everybody staring at you, right?
Sure.
But here you show up at a Bible study and you just put it out there. That must have, first of all, felt a little strange. What did you feel when you were going through that?
When I walked into that room, and it was a team Bible study. There was only a couple guys that were usually ever there, but there was so much comfort that I felt just in the idea of the gospel of you're never going to be good enough. That was such a comforting thought. And I always thought that was something that would give me anxiety, and it always did up to that point. But the idea of you're actually not going to ever achieve this thing that you are shooting for, and you need a lot of help. Those are concepts that I never admitted, but that resonated my shoulders just dropped. Yes, I do need help. No, I can't do it. My strength alone is definitely not enough. I mean, I've proven that year after year, where I've tried every religion and spirituality and self-help book, and nothing ever helped. Because in the end, it all looked back to what? To me, to figure it out. So now this idea that I could lean into Jesus, and the idea that I was perfect in God's eyes through Jesus, whoa, that was these are big concepts, right? Still working them out. But there was just such a infectious feeling that I needed to go back for every week. I'd go in there. And eventually I went in early and I talked to Jeff, and Jeff, that prayer thing you're talking about, man, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to live my life for someone else, for God, for Jesus. I've been trying to live for me for so many years, man. I'm just destroyed. I can't do it anymore. I don't want the pressure anymore. And so, yeah, we prayed the prayer, and my life has been different ever since, but it wasn't like I was just the next day like, oh, life's just, oh, this is easy. No, it was, I just had a helper now. I had something else that was going to help with all the misery and the pain. It wasn't just all about me and how am I going to work this out anymore.
Were you ever able to share this with your dad?
So my father had his stroke and ended up in ICU when I was going through that turbulent playoff situation in 2010. He ended up coming out of that situation in a bad way. He had to get both his legs amputated at the knee because he lost so much blood flow when his heart stopped. His heart stopped for 8 minutes. He ended up being bedridden for the next almost 2 years. And he completely changed. I mean, he was always this very hard-nosed businessman and, this is how things got to be. And, Barry, listen, I'm just smarter than you. And this is what it's got to be. And he became the most appreciative, kind of beautiful, light soul. You hear about these stories, right? When people go through these crazy health situations. I was able to share that with him, and he was so happy for me that I was able to do that. But I think he had his own spiritual kind of experience with going through the hospital and everything, that it wasn't at all my old father that I was saying, man, I found this relationship with Jesus, Dad, and I'm living for him now. When I told him that, he was just in bed going, oh, that's amazing. Wow, Barry, I'm so happy. The other guy before the stroke, I have no idea how he would have reacted.
You would have said, you're only halfway to your 300 wins.
Yeah, Barry, that's great. But listen, we need 150 more wins.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it must have felt good to at least see that in your dad's eyes.
Oh, yeah. There was just such a lightness in his spirit. And my wife and I joke about it because she actually met my dad only one time. We had breakfast at his house once before his stroke. And then she only ever knew the Joe Zito after that. And I was like, honey, you just have no idea. This guy was, he was always the most powerful, most intimidating dude in the room. Incredible. But, what's interesting too, before he died, the chaplain that had led me to Christ, Jeff, told me, I'm just curious. I have a friend down in LA. My father was in LA at the time. He can go hang with your dad and, just talk about whatever and, kind of see what your dad thinks about the gospel and all that. And my father always used the words Jesus, and we always used those words growing up. But Jesus, in the way we grew up, was just an example of somebody who had mastered kind of mental dominion over their life. Right? He wasn't a Christ. He didn't die for our sins. Nothing about the crucifix. So my dad knew about that language. So this pastor comes over to starts hanging with my dad. My dad ends up coming to Christ literally 2-3 weeks before he died. It's just incredible. That whole cycle, how it worked.
How do you look at baseball today? Are you a big fan? Is it something you keep a close eye on, or is it something in your past and you've moved on?
I have some wounds about baseball, certainly. In 2012, I was able to help my team win a World Series, and it was a vastly different experience. And I gave it all to God. I was going out there in these crazy games and saying, God, if you want me to give up 10 runs today, literally, I'm fine with that. I just need to go out and do my best and try to enjoy this and not sabotage it like I had so many times. And I was able to help my team, and we got this ring. And so if I didn't have that ring in 2012 and that experience of kind of coming back as a Giant and helping this team actually win the thing that I was paid to bring over there to go do, I probably would have a lot more pains about baseball. I can watch baseball now. I love it. I don't follow it. I mean, I don't ever know what's going on. I just have it on in the house sometimes because it's calming to me. But I have a lot of friends that have World Series rings, all the money in the world. They can't watch. It's too painful because of the reminder that they didn't achieve what they wanted to. And that's exactly, we all have that to some extent. And I think in the music industry, it's certainly true as well. It's really hard to be happy for other people that are doing things that maybe you never got to do. But I feel really at peace, one Cy Young and one World Series ring that I kind of earned, that's plenty enough. So grateful for all that. And I think the grateful mindset really just allows me to watch baseball and say, man, this is a cool game. I love this game.
It must have been weird going from Oakland to San Francisco. And I mean, you must have had half the region hate you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're a traitor.
Yeah.
What was that like?
That was really interesting. It was Oakland and San Francisco, for those of you out there that know, San Francisco back then was kind of more affiliated with like, the kind of upright, more professional, we're wearing 3-piece suits and, we're very like conducting ourselves in a very professional manner. And Oakland, which still has the reputation now as they're kind of the misfits. They're kind of like the secondary focus in the Bay Area, certainly, but also had this excitement because they were just these kind of kids that didn't care. And the teams were always so young and so good. So going over there was a little bit of a change for me, because I then felt like, well, now I got to be professional and I have all these commas in my paycheck and everyone's looking. And oh man, it was actually terrifying. I didn't feel the freedom to just be my kind of surfer yoga-y kind of self anymore. And it's proven by the fact that I bought a house an hour away from the field. I lived in San Francisco 4 out of the 7 years I played with Oakland. I just love the city, the marina and Pacific Heights. But when I signed with the Giants, man, I lived an hour away because there was this part of me that almost knew, oh, something bad is going to happen, and I don't want to be anywhere near all these fans. It's just crazy to think about. And the year that I ended up helping the team in 2012 and had my best year and helped win the World Series, I actually moved back from that big crazy house in the mountains and lived a mile from the field in Potrero Hill. And I was just plugged in. I was like in the city. I was hanging out because those fears of being judged and all my identity and value about, being so attached to my performance, those things had all gone away. At that point, it was all God's,
Now you're in Nashville, your family's here, and you have, you're in the music world. Mm-hmm. What are you hoping to accomplish in the music world that really fills your heart? Because I can't imagine, after winning the Cy Young Award and winning World Series, that I can't imagine you're going after Entertainer of the Year.
No,
now you're not going to tell me you are, right?
No. That's funny.
So what are you trying to accomplish?
So when I first got here, I started writing and co-writing, and my manager, Robert, just wanted to treat me as a young writer and put me in these rooms with these writers. And so I released a project in 2017, kind of a songwriter-driven, very stripped-down acoustic project, just to show that, it's about songs. Since then, I have gotten a little more into, I think, what really fills me, which I always want the songwriting to be first because it's always about the song, but getting more into the production side and starting to talk about the instrumentation. And my father was an arranger, so I grew up in that world. So figuring out how to create the song so that it can have the largest emotional impact possible. So I'm in this kind of school phase right now where I'm learning all of that, and it's a lot, but eventually want to get back to all the songwriting and then be able to have a hand in the production as well. And I think that would fill me up. And having a studio life means that I don't need to leave my family too much. And that is something that is a huge plus for me. I don't want to be on the road, and, I want to be around for the kids. I want to take my kid to school in the morning, go to the studio for, 6-7 hours, and then come home, hang out, have dinner.
Isn't learning cool?
Oh, learning is so cool, man.
First of all, I think it's how you stay young and obviously relevant. But I think it's really cool that for those of us who have had the actual opportunity to reinvent ourselves and do something completely different than what we did for many, many years. And that's kind of what you're going through now. You had the music thing in your DNA through your family, right? But at the same time, when you went off and played baseball, I mean, that can really define a person for the rest of their lives, being an athlete,
sure,
a pro athlete. But here you turn around, move across the country to a completely different place, environment, with your family, and start something just totally new. I mean, that's got to be really, really something over and above refreshing, it's got to be a spirit-led kind of thing.
It's funny that you say it, because I'm realizing that even though I had retired and took literally a week off and started writing songs, it took me a while to really feel like a musician that was writing songs instead of a baseball player that was writing songs, because that identity is so ingrained after 30 years of playing baseball, right? Since I was 6. So now it's finally like I feel like I'm just a musician now. And now people ask about baseball and I literally go, oh yeah. And then I start talking about pitching. Like every now and then there'll be a kid in high school or whatever, and a friend of mine will be like, hey, can you give my kid some pointers? And last week I was out there and showing this kid a changeup. He'd never thrown one. And I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, I guess I know a thing or two about this, but it's so far from my daily experience because I'm just learning things I've never known. And I'm so green in this industry now. And so it really is spirit led. I mean, a lot of my friends, like I said, they feel like baseball players that are no longer fulfilling their purpose in life. And that is a tough spot to be in, man.
And now you have a new book. How difficult was it to put these thoughts and reveal these stories and put them down on paper? Because, a book doesn't go away.
Yes. Incredibly enlightening experience. I actually learned a lot about my father, his motivations with me. He's not around, so I can't say, hey, Dad. So now, it's just me and my own perspective now. But it was such a great experience going through everything. And it's really taught me a lot about parenting and how am I going to push certain things or not push certain things on my kids, right? Because there's that fine line of I want to support you, but I don't want to force this, and I don't want you to hate it, but I want you to know this is pretty cool. It was a wonderful experience. And I came away with the knowledge that my father was doing his best, always wanted the best for me, and that no matter what, we have flaws as parents, and we're going to screw up our kids in one way or another. And I was kind of upset with my dad for many years for the way that he forced fame and money and things like that on me, and realized that he was kind of pushing his own things that he valued. And now I can say that I just have grace and compassion for him. And my wife and I pray that God, please undo the damage that we are unconsciously doing to our children.
What is the one prayer that you have for the rest of your life here on earth and for your family? What do you pray for?
I pray that God's will be done. But more than that, I pray that my spiritual ears and eyes are open, and that I'm always able to listen to what's happening, to what God's telling me. Because I think for so long, God was trying to tell me something. He was whispering, I didn't hear it. Then he started talking louder. Pretty soon I was getting hit in the face, and beat down. And I had to pay attention. And I don't ever want to get to that place again. So I always want to hear God's voice when it's still a whisper, and continue to just redirect to align with his will, and to not align with my will. And if my will and his will align, man, that's going to be awesome. But just know that we're going to have to keep redirecting here.
Barry, thank you for your time, and thank you for being such a contagious influencer. And go out there and keep the faith, man.
Thank you so much. This has been great.
So, Victoria, I cannot believe I did that interview, and I had no idea that you have had this amazing relationship with Barry and Amber.
Exactly. I know.
And you weren't here for the interview.
For one thing, I was already booked to speak. But number two, you forgot to tell me Barry was coming. So I would have moved mountains to be here. So we're going to have him back. Because there are some other stories I'd love for him to share that he didn't share in this interview that you guys will have to stay tuned, because there's a lot more to Barry Zito than just this one interview.
Well, let's bring them both back. Barry's book is called Curveball,
yes.
And it's in stores. Actually, it's on Amazon.com here in a few weeks.
Get the book. There's a story in there about what I just talked to you about. And once the book comes out, or when Barry wants to talk about it, we'll come back on the show and we can all talk about my journey with Barry and Amber through something that they went through that was really personal. It's an incredible story.
Well, now you've basically rebooked Barry.
That's right. That's my
here
teaser.
Live.
And you're going to do it when I'm not out on the road speaking. We're going to do it when I'm here. And I think we need to bring Amber in as well.
That'll be fun.
You're going to like her as much as you like him.
Does she have any single girlfriends?
They're too young for you. Amber's in her 30s. They're too young.
Oh,
no, don't give me the hands up. Dave, seriously?
Wait. Did I give her hands up? No, I'm doing the math.
You're like looking at me like, that's ridiculous. It is not ridiculous. When they're as young enough to be your daughter, you need to stay away.
My daughters are much younger. I'm sorry.
That's just gross. Okay. That would be so gross.
I'm not.
I don't date guys who date women my daughter's ages. I just can't. Because if I start dating them, I'd be wondering all the time, are they like really dating me for me, or are they really interested in my 23-year-old?
Well, wait a minute. That would be weird. You know what I mean?
I'm not that old.
No, you're like.
I'm a very young 55. I just turned 55.
Do you think it's weird when a 55-year-old girl dates a 35-year-old guy?
Yeah, I do.
Do you think it's weird when a 55-year-old guy dates a 35-year-old girl?
I do.
So what's the cutoff?
Well, everybody's different. Some people would say, I don't think that's weird. So I'm not saying I'm right. I'm talking about for me personally. I have 35-year-olds asking me out. I have 40-year-olds asking me out, and I won't go.
You won't go out with a 40-year-old?
No.
So what's your cutoff?
My cutoff's probably 48, 49, because I don't, you're looking at me. Everybody can't see me. I don't look 55. I don't act 55. No. I don't have the energy of somebody who typically you'd think have 55.
Well,
I have the energy of a 25-year-old. So I'm not your typical 55-year-old, but that's why these younger guys say, why won't you go out with me? You don't even look 55. You don't act 55. And I'm like, but I'm still 55.
No, but you love hits of the 70s.
Exactly.
So
they don't even know who the Eagles are.
Yeah.
How can I go out with a 35-year-old who doesn't know the words to Hotel California?
Mm-hmm.
No thanks.
No, I know.
Steve Perry's single.
Now, but I see how this works. You're very, you can make it work.
Listen, we always get on these tangents, and we were talking about Barry and Amber Zito. I don't know how we got here, but we need to bring it back to Barry and Amber Zito.
No, actually, we're done with them. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad you're back. I wish. I hope you get your voice back. Well, actually,
I don't think you do. I think you like it better like this.
I like it. I love it. I want some more of it.
That's just gross. That's just so inappropriate. But so has this whole last half of this show.
Are we still on?
Oh, no, we're out of here.
They cut us off?
Hey, you guys, thanks for listening. We hope we don't drive you too crazy.
This has been another
episode.
Invigorating, exciting, crazy edition of CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. We do this every week, and we want to hear from you. Get your feedback, and we'd love to get you to rate us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, all those good places. Wherever you get your podcast, please do share us. Share us on social media. So we'll see you next time right here on CIA, Contagious Influencers of America. And remember, go out there and live that life in living color, because it sure is a lot more fun than living it in black and white. See you next time.